Okay, we're ready to go. Good. I'm just going to talk about a quick snapshot of state of local government as we see it in South Africa at present. So I'm not going to cover everything, but I'm just going to try and run through some of the key areas that is facing local government. If we look at media and official reports that we hear today, the focus is really on financial viability. But very little mention gets made of the governance issues, where I believe we're sitting with major problems, and economic sustainability. Because without economic sustainability, we're not going to get to financial viability. So questions that we've got to ask ourselves: why are we concerned and what has gone wrong? If we then look at the status snapshot, as I've just called it, a number of points here. There's no proper viable financial model has ever been created for local government. Back in the early 1990s, pre-94, I wrote a whole discussion paper to the then Minister of Finance. It was Derek Keys, or one of those guys at that stage. And I said at that point, you're going to have to find a way on how you're going to fund local government. Because those were still the days of people living in Johannesburg, where you had a Johannesburg, a Sandton, a Randburg, an Alexandra, a Soweto, and all of these places, Roodepoort. And they were trying to put everything together. And at that stage, already when we were in the negotiating chamber, Gail was in that chamber, Teresa, Francis, and myself were in. And we then recognized that there were going to be problems. They still haven't solved that problem. Municipalities got rid of decades of expertise. The engineers, the finance people, the guys who worked in town planning, etc., they just pushed those guys out of it. It's still happening. It's been happening now in George in the last year and a half, once again, pushing out probably top 5 municipal engineers in the country with over 30 years worth of expertise have been pushed out. The councillors that you find out there today are not skilled. They're not qualified. They're not politically mature for the jobs that they've got to undertake. And the councillors just simply don't understand governance. By governance, I'm talking about what is needed to provide leadership, the management direction that needs to go into it. How do you implement and how do you give policy direction? And the whole aspect of it covered in law of monitoring and oversight. And they don't understand how the law gets applied. And you sit with complex laws. They don't understand the economics of running a municipality and the whole business aspect of it. And most municipalities are not economically viable in their present format. And okay, we can exclude obviously the metros and some of the secondary cities. So the South African system is divided into 8 metros, 19 secondary cities, of which George here is one. And then you get into the various local authorities. Then if you've got no viable economy, then you are not going to be financially viable. And the reason for that is you sit with large numbers of indigent. Those are people who are unemployed, who don't have work, who don't have income, who have very little income. And an indigent is defined in terms of National Treasury as households earning less than about 3,500 Rand per month. It's 2 times the monthly old age pension. That's what they use as the definition. In George, we extend that limit up to about 4,000 Rand a month. So that means that those guys below that level then get what's called basic services, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But now your difficulty is in George, you've got 45% of all households are indigent. Now, in many municipalities, it extends to 60% and often to 80% and higher. Now, that means that the balance, the others who are non-indigent are carrying the can. And if you look at people who are just above the indigent class, in other words, people who are earning 5,000 a month, 6,000 Rand a month, haven't got the money. They just don't have the means to pay for everything that there is. So that gearing effect on the people who pay just becomes heavier and heavier. So you've got that burden. If we then look at another aspect here, just touching on municipal law. You've got a Municipal Structures Act, you've got a Municipal Systems Act, you've got an MFMA, which is the Municipal Financial Management Act. They are complex, and you've got to almost read all of those together, apart from the various other sets of law that is applicable within a municipality. And these laws are written for the good guy, the person who complies with the law. And this is one of the biggest problems in bringing people to book now, as to what is going to be done. So I'm predicting that we are going to see some radical changes within those laws within the next few years as people get brought to book. And one of the aspects here is a councillor. There's a section 173(4) in the MFMA. A councillor may not interfere in the administration. And then when you go and read what it means when it's an offence, it's a criminal offence in terms of law, and it's punishable by a fine or imprisonment up to 5 years. Now within the Systems Act there are also similar provisions at different years worth of imprisonment. And we are seeing the courts applying those laws at present. There are people being put away. But councillors nevertheless want to keep their hands within the till. They want to interfere. And we are going to see here in George, shortly, there are going to be councillors and municipal managers and directors who are going to come and fetch them and take them away. Councillors may not interfere in supply chain management or in staffing matters. And boy, they do. Or you may not direct any expenditure be undertaken that is not approved or not on budget. There's a code of conduct for councillors and for officials. For officials, in certain aspects of it, there's regulation. Under the code of conduct of councillors, the difficulty often is how to get those, the sanctions, how to get them carried out. And council meetings have to approve projects if they are not delegated. So when the hawks come in, when priority crimes come to look at situations, they look at whether an action is lawful or it's unlawful. And how do you prove that it is unlawful? Which it's complex stuff that you've got to go through. In what is happening in George, in terms of the investigations that are taking place by the Hawks, they've called for every single minute of council meetings, every single committee meeting, going back over a couple of years. And they'll probably go back further. And they've got to get people to listen through those tapes of the actual meetings and verify them against the minutes. And so I suppose you can ask yourself, where do things go wrong? Where did things go wrong? Councillors, they often want to appoint weak municipal managers or directors or senior managers who they believe that they can then influence. And the councillors then they move on to the whole process of intimidating, threatening, manipulating, pressurizing these officials. And they get involved in nepotism, cronyism, in appointments, and the whole temporary worker project EPWP process. Now, when government brought in EPWP, it's another area where you can now try and manipulate and play nepotism and cronyism, try and influence tenders. The government brought in this preferential procurement act to favour the disadvantaged, and therefore people who don't have the level of quality. There's a CIDB grading in the construction industry. You've got to have a certain grading before you can undertake a tender or to undertake work of a certain level. And so you find councillors now want to give the guy with a wheelbarrow the job that actually needs heavy equipment, and so forth. This whole thing of pet projects that people want that are often outside the core service delivery. Then another bad area of deviations, where the municipal manager is able to sign off on expenditure that hasn't gone through the supply chain. And both the Auditor General and I think the prosecuting authorities are going to start catching municipal managers on that little exercise. That is apart from the fact that you've got weak managers who are unable to do the type of work. That's probably what Ron is talking about, where the administration is just so weak. It is unable to execute any type of project. If we look at some of the other weaknesses, as I said, it's this implementation problem, it's a decision-making problem, and all of this causes delay in service delivery. Then you find factions within councils and often within governing caucuses then paralyze the administration. They stall projects, and it just leads to paralysis of service delivery. If we look at the financial viability challenge, there's simply not enough money or revenue for all of the expenditure needs within municipalities. I mentioned the equitable share grant, which is given to indigents. Now that is meant to subsidize the cost of their services of getting 6 kilolitres worth of water in a month, 50 kilowatt hours worth of electricity, their sewage bill, their refuse bill. The struggle to collect debtors. If a municipality is not collecting 95% of its debtors, it's got a problem. And most municipalities are not able to get to that 95%. And in George, we've pushed that to 96 and 97% on a consistent basis. And in some months, it goes up to 105%. And the next area that we're going to be facing is we need to move onto water, onto prepaid systems. It's the only way it is going to go forward. Municipalities where they haven't been or they're not on prepaid electricity have run into problems. And I've been monitoring over the last number of years Welkom, Harry Smith, Witbank as examples. Now those are all big regional cities, and each one they've run into problems in paying their Eskom account. And my advice has been that there's no way that they're ever going to have to be able to repay those Eskom accounts. Because if you had to do that over a reasonable period of time, you would have to penalize the payers by increasing their overall bill, their total bill that they pay in the municipality on all services, by something like 20 to 30% one time, before you even talk about inflation. So they're going to have to write that off. But you know, you can't allow simply the writing off of those type of amounts.
Okay, can you try and wind up?
We are winding up now. Aging infrastructure, the whole water, wastewater, electricity, roads, infrastructure is all aging. Water networks, we're seeing losses of 30% and above. In Cape Town, for example, the water network is over 10,500 kilometers in length. So it's a distance from Cape Town to the south of Sydney, if you had to stretch out those pipes. They are only able to replace at something like 50 to 90 kilometers per year, at less than 1%. So it's going to take them 100 years at this rate to be able to replace that network. Your sewage systems are starting to fail. You need billions to do this. In George, there's an upgrade program that's now underway on waterworks and wastewater works. That's expansion and upgrades. That's the equivalent of 25 to 30% of the present total asset base on the financial statements of the municipality. Then just economic sustainability. If you haven't got work with an area, if the guys are not contributing to the municipality to become part of that financial viability, it becomes a vicious circle. So you've got to get the local economies working. And this is what government doesn't understand. And in my view, you have to start with the secondary cities. You've got to start with the bigger municipalities. So if we just look at solutions, call to action, and just listening what Andrew had to say today, and the problems that we are seeing, I'm starting to say we are returning to a state of thuggery. So we're almost going back to what Andrew was talking about. These wars that take place ultimately. And the type of feudal system that certain councillors want to have. They want to control the situation and they want everybody to suffer. So we need to upgrade the whole criminal justice system. Civil society has to get more involved. 6-7 years ago when I became a councillor here, we had, for this ward where Wilderness is, we had a problem with the Ratepayers Association. Eventually the ratepayers become a partner and they do a lot of work here in conjunction with the municipality. And we support each other in what has been done between the municipality and the ratepayers, and that's ultimately where you need to get. So we've got to offer citizens opportunities, we've got to give them freedom. And the private sector is going to have to come in and help on the infrastructure. In my view, how that's going to happen is going to be extremely interesting in times to come. Thank you.
George? Okay, yes, George.
Have municipalities ever considered in South Africa to get smaller, to deregulate, privatize? And I believe there's examples in municipalities, I think in Canada, that consist of 4 or 5 people, which only make decisions and control that work, allocate their work to private people and then exercise control.
Yeah. You know, look, that would be a beautiful answer. I've stated within the municipality that if you let me run this municipality, I would, within a year, I'd cut 10% of the costs. Okay, that would turn me into a billionaire in terms of the money, if I listed that. But at the same time, I mean, you've got to reduce the costs. But the difficulty that you have is you've got to have the license to be able to go and do that, because you've got to collect money from everybody, all your customers, and that is your difficulty. You've got to have that sort of authority. So I think we're probably pretty far away. The US, I've done research and I've presented previously at Libertarian conference on what's been done in the States in terms of privatization and breaking down. Because there's, you can go and just as you bought electricity from Eskom in the past, you could buy water from your water authority, from your refuse collector, and take a lot of that away. But ultimately you could then make it smaller just on those on land use and certain of those services. But your problem is that indigent market and who subsidizes that and how you recover money.
And of course the ideological
Yes.
barrier that goes into
Yes, absolutely. Ron?
Yes, thank you. I need a copy of your
presentation if possible, because you've said it all absolutely eloquently, and it's exactly as it is, certainly in our municipality. I have a negative comment, and I hope you can talk me out of this. Being aware of all of these things, having experienced firsthand everything that was on that list, understanding that things like the equitable share municipal income grants are actually spent on interest payments and salaries and not on the indigent, etc. My view is that our municipality, it's too late. You simply cannot save it. I'm talking as a business person going into a bankrupt municipality, having a look around at the governance and the constitution, which doesn't allow us to sort this out. For me, it's too late. Is there, am I wrong?
Look, it's a difficult one. My experience, and I've been fortunate to have been involved with National Treasury on a number of engagements. National Treasury are very astute and very smart, and they understand what needs to be done, and in my view are doing a good job. Your provincial government needs to be, provincial finance needs to be smart enough, because Makana will fall under provincial government, and that's where your issues are. But I believe what National Treasury and Kochte will put pressure. Ultimately, they need to put pressure on provincial government to sort out the municipalities. But it's going to be a long, hard haul, because even within the secondary cities, there are many of them that are struggling. Of those 19 secondary cities, I would, just at the top of my head, I would say probably half of them are struggling. So, but we can't afford to let local government fail.
It's a coal face.
That's the problem. All right, great. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.